Hey kids, howdy. Welcome once again to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is July 21st. We're almost done with this month. It's the change of the seasons and the new moon in Leo. It's going to be an interesting week.
Change of the seasons. What?
The mansion.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
I
This
was
is
like,
yeah, I shouldn't have used the word season. We leave Cancer, season, mansion, sign into Leo. We're actually going to talk a lot about Leo today for a couple of reasons, which I'll get to a little bit later.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I think so is referring to me as a Leo, and yes, I am all Leo, baby. Send me a compliment, and I will give you the key to my house. Not really. All right. It's a reasonable week with a new moon and a new mansion, and the big kickers of July that were going to be difficult are behind us, right? Uranus moved into Gemini. That was the big rock'em sock'em from early in the month, and man, have we seen things explode on the political landscape. That was a promise. And just so you guys get that all of the talk and the ideas and the Epstein and the that's all a kind of a Gemini. Everybody's in debate. The divide has gotten bigger. MAGA has split. That's all very Uranus and Gemini. And just remember, if it's happening out there, it's also happening inside of each of us through the collective, right? So that's one of the reasons why I like to teach astrology, is so that you combine your own experience and the collective experience when you're imagining how the energy is working, because just as the planets don't cause anything to happen, they reflect what happens. That reflection is also for us personally and universally. So we experience the energy of both how something is hitting our chart and how it's impacting the collective. So thank goodness we only have a few months of this Uranus and Gemini to kind of get used to it. We get a little break, and then it's all about it starting next spring. The other thing that made or is making July challenging was Mercury's retrograde, but he's already turned around, and he's not making too many transits during this retrograde, so it's not as bumpy as other retrogrades might be. I'll get to that in a minute as well. There's a lot to talk about. But first, let's answer a question. Hi, Dr. Michael. Yesterday, I looked at my progressed chart. I'm wondering, should I be reading horoscopes for my progressed sun and or rising sign? Though I admit I have shifted my horoscope reading practices for many of the reasons you highlight on the podcast and in your blog. Thank you, in parentheses. I'm a natal Taurus sun, Virgo moon, and rising. I have a progressed Cancer sun, Libra rising, and Aquarius moon. The luxury of having a big 3 instead of a big 2 is enticing. I'm still learning about progressed charts and how to work with them. With great appreciation for your generosity and wisdom, light and love to you, Zoe and Penelope. Callie rhymes with Sally. You know, I love this question because my progressed sun and my progressed rising have just changed signs in the last 2 years. So let's give a quick little primer about, what Callie's even asking about. So the progressed chart is an internal expression, right? It doesn't follow the solar system. It's an algorithm we apply to the natal chart where everything gets moved forward really, really slowly. And we interpret that chart for inner evolution through life. In fact, because the sun moves 1 degree a day and there's a spin of the earth for every day, the algorithm is actually the correlation between 1 day and 1 year. Like, if you look at a birthday chart and then you look at the next day, that correlates to a person's first year of their progressed experience. 5 days after their birth date would correlate to their 5-year-old evolution, and so on and so on. So things move in the progressed chart, and we interpret that movement, but it's so slow that it's nothing like transits. It's a whole different way we use the movement to recognize moments of great shift. If the sun's going to move 1 degree per year in the progressed chart, that means that every 30 years after a certain moment, you're going to change sun sign by progression. For example, my progressed sun just moved into Scorpio. So I am not a Scorpio sun now. I am still all Leo. But the evolution of who I am has come into a place where I understand alchemy and change and death and transformation. And this correlates with a moment where teaching in my world has gotten richer, juicier, deeper. My progressed rising is now in Pisces, which is sort of reflecting my hermiting and keeping a really small life sequestered from the world as I do my work. So those two changes accurately reflect things about my evolution. And so Sally's asking if she's following these things and she sees that her sun has changed signs by progression. The question she's asking is, should she look at transits to her progressed sun and or rising to reflect the daily experience of energy, but also on a deeper, richer inner level? So one of the things that Callie says is, I'm still learning about progressed charts and how to work with them. Well, Sally, me too, in that I use progressions in the way that I do in sessions. It's incredibly rich to do so, especially when someone comes for a session and they're in a juicy moment in their progressed chart for one reason or another. And yes, it is possible to work with transits transiting the progressed chart placement. But while I understand that intuitively, I've never done that. I've never worked with people in that way. So you probably have to find another astrologer who does that work and can offer you some expertise around it. The reason I don't is that I started as a transit astrologer, meaning all I was interested in the first 10 years of study was the immediate energy that we were all grappling with from a Tuesday to a Wednesday to a Thursday, because that's how I needed astrology for my own purposes. So then when I learned about progressions and I found how outrageously rich they were, I was already at a place in my study of astrology where you have to start making choices. I'm not going to study that section of astrology. I'm going to focus on this one. Simply because if you wanted to look at everything that astrology had to offer technique-wise, you would lose your mind in just the math of it all. And so I use progressions to describe the inner evolution. I use transits on the natal chart to describe what your year is going to be like. And it is absolutely possible to work with transits and progressions, but I'm not your guy to help you understand how. As a PS, Sally, if you learn anything interesting, send some of that information my way. So Mercury is retrograde in the sign of Leo. He turned around last week. And I'll just put a little note now. I heard myself say he turned around last week. I just have to tell you all, because someone did comment on social media, do we have to gender the planets? And I just want everybody to know I'm working on it. I am 61 years old, kids, and I sound like one of those old people who say, that's just the way it is. So we didn't have to do that in the old days, because I don't operate like that. I operate like a modern human being, but I do have it in my body that the gods and goddesses were gendered, and therefore the planets named by them or for them were gendered. And as I learned astrology, everything was gendered because it was from the old-timey days of patriarchy. So I want everybody to know that while I still gender the planets, I don't do it all the time, and I am working on just stopping that. Old habits die very hard. Meanwhile, Mercury, whatever his gender is, whatever their gender is, actually, Mercury and Hermes would be a good sort of androgynous figure. The interesting thing about this retrograde, and we talked about this last week, is the fact that it's not making any big dynamic triple transits. So Mercury's sort of off on his own in this retrograde, which makes it a very different retrograde than is typical. In fact, I would say that while I've not clocked this with specificity or like with spreadsheets or something, but like I don't recall seeing a Mercury retrograde like this, like in my memory.
Interesting.
So to me, there's a lot to be said then about this phenomenon. First, I'll talk about just Mercury's retrograde in Leo is all about our creative voice, centering ourselves powerfully in how we express ourselves. It will increase your leadership voice, your capacity to find joy in your perceptions. Mercury, rules our perceptions. Leo invented joy and children and pets and sex and all the fun stuff. Plus, the house in your natal chart that's ruled by Mercury is where ruled by Leo, is where the most, interesting and bumpy potential communication stuff will play out. But for the collective right now, I'm very enamored by the elegance of like the synchronicities of Leo, of Mercury retrograding in Leo, of Mars retrograding from Cancer back to Leo, along with Mercury and Venus doing a retrograde. And this is the very next retrograde since that gathering of all the personal planets, and it's in Leo. I think that's interesting. And we're entering the Leo mansion, and the new moon in Leo has a gobsmacking connection to the outer planet's grand sextile in preparing us to handle that outer planet energy with the new moon that kicks off this week. So let me see if I can break this down in a clear manner in the way that I'm, experiencing it inside my own mind. Remember that all of the archetypes live in us, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you're not probably thinking about like who's a Leo in your life, but Leo as the archetype of joy, creative expression, and leadership that lives inside of all of us. I've talked a lot about the activated voice, that it's necessary for all of us to step up to some level of activation, whatever the style is. Like, I don't care if it's quietly praying for peace or standing on the corner with a bullhorn. We cannot sit out of what is happening on the planet. And I would say that Leo energy is the energy that's going to generate collective leadership to rise up. So I think this story starts back in the fall when Mars was in Cancer, learning about, preparation and self-care. And then he moved into Leo, where it's all about pushing ourselves out, centering ourselves more assertively and visibly in our world. And then he went back to Cancer to say, all right, wait a minute. I know there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting up ahead. I'd better learn more about preparation and rest and self-care. And then the supposition would be that Mars moves back into Leo, more capable of helping us meet the demands of what's coming or what's here and what's coming, because we've learned a thing or two about balance and preparation. So if we then layer in this unusual Mercury retrograde in Leo, where I've already sort of hopefully presented to you guys in a clear way that this is helping us all in the collective jump up to a higher level of using our voice in that powerful, centered way. So the fact that Mercury, the personal planet that's touching all of our minds directly because it's a personal planet, isn't touching the planetary setup that's creating the chaos, the breakdown, and the revolution. Right? So if I look at the solar system and what it's doing, the voice of the solar system is in another room, has sort of left the party to say, oh God, they expect me to sing that song later? I'd better go warm up my voice. I'd better go get my money notes back. Like if someone wanted me to sing in a spiritual center, I'd be like, I'm going to need 4 or 5 weeks to get my big belty notes back. So in the analogy of singing your song, I think that if we point to Mars and what he offered us in the Leo mansion in our embodiment, Mercury is now offering us in our thinking and perceiving. And it's almost as if our personal experience of rewiring that the Mercury retrograde is bringing us won't be negatively impacted as much by the world's unfolding. Like it's the world's doing its thing and our minds are in the unconscious doing its thing. And then when Mercury comes out and then we're in the Leo mansion in a few days and then we've got our Leo new moon that sort of sets us up for the whole lunar cycle to be about this Leonian activation that we all need to be going through. And so far we've talked about body, Mars, now mind, Mercury, which we are in. And then we get into the Leo mansion like tomorrow. And then our new moon on Friday kicks us off into something really interesting that's fitting the theme that I'm trying to convey to you all. So keeping in mind the sort of Leo theme that's in our body and now in our voice, tomorrow, actually in the wee hours of tonight into tomorrow, starts the Leo mansion. So when the sun moves into Leo, it's, height of summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the most light is sort of giving us play. Yes, days are getting shorter, but we don't notice it yet. We're not in the harvest. We're not in the reaping or sowing. So it's the mansion of joy. It's the mansion of your creative expression, hobbies, children, pets, sex, all of the things that are fun, joyful, and yummy in life, Leo owns and rules. Part of why this is because of the rulership. Leo rules the sun. So if the sun is the burning bright light at the center of us, it is our conscious awareness itself. Leo ruling the sun tells us that when we are connected to that, when we are connected to the Father God of the sunlight, we are at the center of our being, and therefore joy is our birthright. The other 11 signs will give us complications to set up structures to create a life to be had, but there's one voice in the midst of all that that's sort of yelling quite loudly and clearly, make it fun, make it joyful, I'm creative, let's play. But I also want you to think about the fact that the sun is a being. Like, we are beings, and we understand our beingness as individuals in bodies and sharing space with a lot of others. But the collective on the earth is a being of feminine expansion, the mother goddess, the earth that birthed us all, which, of course, she could not have done without the opposite, the Father God, the sunlight pouring down onto the wet earth. And so when they come together, that opposition creates a transcendent third. That transcendent third is us. Consciousness is created when the wet, fertile earth marries the strong, brilliant sunlight. So from that perspective, you can stretch a little, squint your woo-woo eyes a bit, and recognize the Leo placement as the center of all, the center of everything, so that when you're listening to what I'm saying about this lunar cycle that starts on Friday, that part of you is getting that we're building a personal consciousness that's kind of set up just like the solar system's consciousness, where we understand our feminine nature and our masculine nature as balanced and capable of creating transcendent thirds, so that the Leo archetype, being the one that's present when we're being given some marching orders with the new moon that's coming, to me has this elegance of the layered story I'm telling you that I'm almost at the last part of, that starts with Mars, then with Mercury, then with the Leo mansion tomorrow, and then with Thursday's new moon. So the new moon in Leo is on the 24th. It's on Thursday. It's like midday Pacific time, like so right at the, noonish here in the West. And of course, it's the new moon where you should focus on all of those Leonian things, your creative projects, your sense of powering your voice up, putting yourself out into the world in a more centered way. Leo is the benevolent king, as opposed to the warrior consciousness. Warrior, like Mars, divides everything into right and wrong and destroys what's wrong and lifts up what's right, which is not good when you want leadership, right? You don't want your leader to have that attitude. We've got that in the United States right now. We want benevolent leader that is stern enough to maintain a sense of control, but benevolent enough to allow for our humanity to be part of who we are. So it's not about perfection. It's about loving who we are, perfect and imperfect. Leo is where we might be able to love ourselves, warts and all. But the thing I love about this new moon and what I'm building to this whole episode starts with the fact that the degree point in Leo that the sun and the moon are meeting up at, is 2. Sun at 2 degrees Leo, moon at 2 degrees of Leo. Why that's interesting is because Pluto is at 2 degrees of Aquarius. Saturn and Neptune are at 1 and 2 degrees of Aries, respectively. Uranus, not quite at 2. He's still at 0 because he just moved in. He won't even actually get to 2 this year before he retrogrades. But you see, the grand sextile that I've been talking about is officially in place. Again, only for the summer. The retrograde motion will pull it back so that it sort of has an ebb and a flow. And we're in the ebb. Do I have that right? Ebb, flow? I don't know. Expansion, contraction. We're in the expansion of it all now. So with the new moon touching everybody in the outer planets, now do you see the story I've been trying to build, Zoe? That we're in this Leo private personal reinvention since last fall. Not quite done with it because Mercury's continuing. But once Uranus moved into Gemini, the war began. It's in earnest. We're in fast revolutionary changes. Yes, there might be a breath in the fall, but next year is just as wacky as this year is.
Okay.
Well, think about it. It's just an election year in the United States, right? It's like you don't need an astrologer to tell you the 26 is likely to be, bumpier than even 25 has been. And I believe that that is so, which is why I keep talking about preparation, activation, and standing up into your powerful voice. Because this new moon says, I move forward powerfully and creatively, allowing for death and rebirth and all the changes and transformations that might need to happen for me to step into this higher level of operating. Thank you, opposition to Pluto. The sun and the moon in Leo in a sextile with Uranus allows us to set powerful intentions in the Leo way. accepting and ready for absolute chaos, sudden change, instability, and the capacity for revolutionary change. Pluto, though he's also changing through death and rebirth, will actually be the sort of, I don't know if stabilizing is the right word, but the sort of gravitas and the depth of the changes we're creating, right? It's like Uranus will light the dynamite blast for Pluto to experience the dirt and the rocks being kicked out so that we can go deeper, right? So that's the moon's connection to Pluto and to Uranus, slow change, fast change. But there's also an exact trine from the new moon to Saturn and Neptune. See, Saturn and Neptune is where the personal activation lives. And that's because Saturn is there, social planet. But let's start with the trine to Neptune. Everything that's happening on the planet, and certainly in the United States and Eastern Europe, is all about ideology, right? Certainly in the United States, it's very overt. It's very obvious. It's a battle of ideology, and Neptune is the flame. It's the spark. You've got change being held in air signs, both slow and fast change, but it's Neptune in Aries that's got the lighter and the gas can, and in Aries has been sort of throwing the gas on the fire and then lighting it up. But Neptune's an outer planet. So Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus in this dynamic grand sextile is, yes, very directly expressing or reflecting the radical changes that are happening. But because they're outer planets, they're a little apart from us in bodies in our three-dimensional lives, walking around the street. Yes, everything the outer planets do impacts us quite directly, but they are representing changes that are happening at the universal level, the collective level, and the institutional level. It's Saturn's presence that makes it something we are all experiencing as difficulty or lessons or as constrictions. Without Saturn, it would be a very different story, still radically transformational and maybe unstable. But Saturn is what's making it a lesson for every freaking one of us to have to be able to figure out how we're going to see the world as loving and joyful while we're cleaning up the destruction as it's happening. And I think that only Leo knows how to do that. So put those intentions into your new moon experience on Thursday, because not only do you want to celebrate your own creativity, you want to set yourself up to be serving the planet at the same time. And the beauty of Leo is that you get to do both. That is, you get to serve, but you get to serve through your gifts, through your creative offerings, through you centering your voice out there. And again, I don't care if the voice you use is whispered in prayer, with the door closed to the outside world, because that's all you can manage in terms of activism. Or you do the other, extreme and anything and everything in between. Now, if you just look at the geometry of the sun and the moon and the outer planets and Saturn, it's lovely. It's productive. It's clean geometry. But of course, it's not going to be that, because there's other energies present that are important to at least know about. One is that Venus in Gemini is going to be squaring the nodes of the moon, and a loose square to Neptune and Aries. That square is very loose, doesn't really grab me, but in a moment of setting intentions, we do that mentally. We do that with our mind, right? Whether we're making a list or thinking about them, we need our minds just to move through the act of setting an intention. One of the values of having Venus in Gemini is that, well, yes, she's sort of very chatty and maybe less, deep in considerations of the emotional body. In Gemini, we can make more intellectual sense of our emotions and our heart's desires. So I think it's helpful that as we're thinking about what we want to create, and our thinking mechanism is retrograde and therefore a little challenged, the heart's gonna feel the instability of moving away from the past and creating a new future. This energy is exact about 3 days before the new moon hits exactly. So it does mean that this whole part of the month and the first week of the new moon features this idea that our emotional bodies at the personal level are going to feel some kind of unstable way as we look out at the world changing radically and faster than maybe we think we can keep up. And because Mars is over there near the South Node, Venus is squaring Mars during this new moon, which is also going to be like a friction or a cognitive dissonance between, what we want to do and what our feelings will tell us that are maybe conflicted. Venus in Gemini is very good at finding the two sides of things when in debate, which looks more like a stalemate in a square between Mars and Venus rather than a moment of clarity and flow. You should expect when you're sitting down to think about the new moon and the lunar cycle ahead, you should be feeling some conflict between what you want in your heart's desire and what your body's capable of creating right now. So what I'll leave you with in contemplating the new moon in Leo, it's in the full moon in Aquarius that we go through the process of releasing ego and self-focus and narcissistic tendencies that live in the Leo mansion. We release them so that we can honor the Aquarius directive to serve the community. So in this way, I would invite you to go like all in with your Leonian, largesse when you think about the intentions you want to set and the way you want to feel creatively as you move through the next couple of weeks, trusting that we will go through a process in 2 weeks' time that will take your sense of offering and right-size it or teach you what you have to know about letting go of certain aspects of your ideas in order to be, in more humble service. So think big now, correct yourself later. Like, ask for forgiveness tomorrow rather than permission today. And just, let your Leo flag fly for a little bit and see how it feels. For those of us that don't have any challenge with this extroverted outward expression, have fun. And for those of you where that's a little scarier, remember that we are, in fact, being prepared to center ourselves more powerfully. So look back to your autumn experience in the first Mercury retrograde with the other two personal planets and now, and clock the progress. I guarantee you're going to see that you are different, very different than you were last October. Set big intentions, kids, and I'll see you next week. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Michael, there's a question that I saw that actually I think is quite relevant after I heard the astrology for this coming week.
Fabulous.
I think you'll find it interesting. So, Jennifer writes, "Hi, Dr. M and Zoe." And she spells my name ZHO, which I kind of like.
I like that too. It almost has a Chinese influence.
Yeah, that
Chinese.
would be Joe, actually, if
Yeah,
you were
okay,
reading that in
yeah.
Chinese. But it's, I like the heft it brings. Okay, she says, "I love you both. Here's my question. I have a diagnosed narcissist in my life. Like many people who follow astrology, I often tune into the astrological placements of my friends and family. If I know someone with a particular placement might be struggling, I'll share some information. Or if they're about to have a big day, I'll forward them some your astrology forecast video for the day.
Love that.
I understand not everything applies universally, even when shared placements. Astrology is filtered through our current circumstances, personal narratives, and past experiences, but generally it resonates. Okay. However, I've noticed that for the narcissist in my life, this isn't the case.
Ha!
How much does their diagnosis influence their astrology, or does it affect them no more or less than anyone else? Since you're also a psychologist, I was hoping you might offer some unique insight."
Golly. This is an interesting question. And so when I share what I'm about to share, it'll be even more sort of funny as me with a Leo sun, because when I was contemplating my doctoral dissertation, I had an idea to do something about the Jungian archetypes as they related to the four, major personality disorders, narcissism being one, narcissistic personality disorder. And then a second idea that I had that I actually did what's called a pilot study, meaning I contacted 20 people who had heavy Leo placements in their chart. And then I had them do the MMCI, a very comprehensive psychological testing device that measures, among other things, narcissism. And there was a correlation. These people had high scores, enough that it was like, there's a doctoral dissertation in there.
Interesting.
And as a Leo sun who has sort of struggled with, my own sort of narcissistic qualities, that was very interesting to me, as is that notion of that we all live on some personality disorder continuum.
Right. And I'm thinking, there's other things like, I don't know, someone born with like OCD or
but
chronic
here's
forever
the
depression
thing about
versus their sign.
narcissists. When you are a diagnosed narcissist, there is no internal self. Now, I know that pedestrians will hear that language and they won't get it.
Yeah, I need a little
got
more
it after
explanation.
6 years of grad school. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like watching, a physicist talk about math. It's like I have an intuitive understanding of physics until they start talking physics, and then I'm like, what? So I talk about this in a lot of my teaching because this happens at the breast at 6 months. There's like a psychotic break where the infant goes from being undifferentiated and sort of living in a kind of oneness. At 6 months or so, they recognize that the mother who feeds them and the mother that doesn't is the same mother and not you. So there's like this split that happens there. And then the infant, having this psychotic break, develops a personality, develops a separateness. With a personality disorder, all of them, something has to happen at the breast so that the connection doesn't happen appropriately or I hate that word, naturally, organically. And the theorist who I'm talking about, Melanie Klein, she was like, you just have to be like the good enough mother. It wasn't like you got to be great at it, otherwise it's bad. It's like, no, you can suck at it and you will still create a child that has a separate sense of self. There has to be something disconnected or nefarious going on from the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
So at that split, the undifferentiated baby who becomes a narcissist stays undifferentiated. They don't develop the sense that mother is separate from them. So the good mother that brings the breast is wonderful, and the bad mother who ignores the cries is fucking awful. And it doesn't matter that it's the same mother and not him. I'm making an assumption this is a male. But they grow up to not have the experience of a separate self. Everything is a function of the outside world reflecting them, so that this is why our president can be turned around in an instant by just flattering him. It doesn't matter what you said 6 months ago.
Right.
The flattery works. It makes you look at Trump and say, well, he's just a fucking idiot. But the truth is he's a malignant narcissist.
Oh.
The flattery is just him flattering himself. And the negativity is just him being negative, and that's reprehensible. That person is an evil, awful asshole. So astrology reflects who we are, I think, more as a function of our internal self than our external self. Like, there's very specific places in a chart that represent the external self in a body. The rising sign, the first house, the sixth house for the health of the body, and the planet Mars. Everything else is about things that are internal. Mm-hmm. Your mind and thoughts, they're internal. Your feelings, internal. So that even the outer planets that represent the higher self wouldn't land on the narcissist as anything other than their wonderful self, being out in the world. So that would be my answer. This is a gobsmacking question, and I've never had the thought. I've never been asked it, but the answer came rushing into my mind that without an internal self and a fixation on the external as if it is who they are, how could astrology reflect moments of grief, moments of process, moments of quietude because you're going through something, right? The narcissist doesn't have that kind of an evolving inner life. I love the question.
We have an email in dream from Pete, and it's an interesting one. He says, dreamt that I saw a beautiful dress in a magazine. Lace, long sleeve kimono style wrap with silk ribbon waist tie. Very simple, minimal, but elegant. Went to a nice department store to try it on. Fit perfectly, very flattering. I was a male in this dream, as I am in real life, and there was no aspect of cross-dressing or trying to appear feminine. Both me and the salesperson agreed how well it fit, how flattering the design was on my body. The price was expensive, but I thought I would buy it for special events. The salesperson started to add some pressure. Even though the dress was perfect, I became hesitant that it was white lace and was afraid people would think it was a wedding dress. I then started to think it would be beautiful in a midnight blue, still elegant and beautiful, but even more sophisticated. The salesperson only had it in white, so I left and tried to search online for a blue version. That's when I woke up.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought this was so interesting because a dress is clearly associated with femininity. Also, it being more of a robe and being silk, I feel like those are also feminine things. Like if you were to make a piece of clothing more androgynous or more feminine, you'd maybe use silk, or you'd maybe have it a little more open with a tie. Yeah, but I just think it's interesting. It's like there was no mental attention towards him being feminine,
Right.
or cross-dress, like it being something he's not supposed to wear, air quotes, and then wanting to wear this thing. So yeah, I found this dream very interesting.
Clothes help us express ourselves with specificity, right? We take on the drag of that which we want to be perceived in the world as. So we have to start with that. Like I'm going to just start with the inch by inch things that I can sort of trust in interpreting this dream. So it starts with a consideration of how Pete would like to be seen in the world, how to move about the world in a way that's visible, but that has something to do with what he wants to express, how he wants to self-express. So it's a symbol of self-expression, not a literal desire for self-expression. I don't think that Pete's, sort of response to this dream should be to buy a dress unless it feels like a real strong impulse.
Right.
The fact that he sees the dress in a magazine, we have to take in, right? It's part of the story. So that he's inspired by something in the collective, in the zeitgeist, right? What do magazines about fashion do? They are an au courant reflection of what is cool and hip and acceptable and, that's sick and slaying, all the... You're younger than me. You know the words.
Yes.
You sing today? Right? So... Pete's in a consideration of how he wants to express, but there's this thing about the collective. Now, this isn't necessarily like a bad thing. In fact, because the dress and the idea of the dress changes to a different color, I think that's going to be important, too, to the evolution of what the dream means.
Right.
But we have to start with this sense of it's an idea about things that are out there. I don't know if this applies, but from the moment you read the dream, I can't stop picturing all of the men on TikTok who do videos about their painted nails, right? So you've got all of these masculine, lovely, secure men, straight men, painting their nails and having them judged by other men because they're doing something feminine. So that when I then think of Pete and the magazine and the dress, I'm brought to mind about how limiting it is for men to self-express because there's so many rigid rules. Even the idea of self-expressing through adornments is a feminine idea. Like even the kimono is undeniably feminine.
Right.
Right? A robe might be worn by, a traditional masculine or traditional feminine person, but once it's a kimono and lace and long sleeve, it's very feminine. So even the idea that he goes to a nice department store to try it on suggests this idea of zeitgeist culture. Department stores, a public place. What do people do there? They converge to be transformed into being adorned in a culturally appropriate manner. So all of this feels just slightly one step removed from Pete because of these images that say the motivation seems to be about things that are more superficial or less individual. So like the little bits about it looking good and that the price was expensive and the salesperson sort of agreed and was being a little pressure. So remember, it's not a salesperson's dream. It's Pete's dream. So there are thoughts that Pete has that sort of pressures him into sort of paying some sort of a price for some kind of inauthentic expression or something that's natural to Pete that there's some sensitivity about. Like he needs to be dressed in the right way, and yet the dress is antithetical to his waking life, experience. There is a sense in the dream of he must get this thing, but not in this place, not by this person, not in the pressured thought forms inside of him that says, yes, conform, pay the price to be received by the world, but you're going to have to like dumb down some of your, inauthenticity, or dumb down your authenticity to create something. Now I'm starting to think about people who make content. Right? Where there's like, I want to make content that comes from my heart, but I know that if I make it about this, or if I take off my shirt, or if I blah, 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 it'll get more traction.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another way I'm seeing the distinction between who Pete is and this sort of outfit that if it looks good and it fits, that's great, but it's not about what's truly authentic, but what matches or is acceptable. What I love about the dream is Pete clearly gets it. And he's like, oh, I'm in the wrong room. I'm not making the wrong choice. I'm in the wrong room. And so when he then extricates himself, the idea that the color isn't right is important for us to interpret. And because it's blue, I have to go to the throat chakra and the voice, the communication. Midnight blue is an interesting choice of moniker because it suggests blue of communication that is comfortable with the shadow. Nighttime darkness in dreams is a shadow indicator. So I would say blue, throat chakra, midnight blue, that's communication that understands the bright, yummy light of stuff and the gravitas. Now I'm thinking about pop astrologers versus me. If I talked about politicians and celebrities' charts, if I did a reading for every event that was kooky, I'd be famous.
Right.
If I did presentations on social media that just talked about one transit or another, I'd be followed by more people, but they'd be people who don't really understand astrology. So I'm guessing that somewhere in Pete's life, there's a burgeoning desire to be creative in a new way that might be antithetical to how he's been perceived in the past. And I think the dream is suggesting to come back into center and find the most authentic voice you can that doesn't capitulate to what is maybe wanted in your immediate environment that's not true to you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list. Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. It's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.